Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and it's not Spawn Year, it's day 33 of my comic review video day calendar, and this time I'm finally going to tackle a little Fantastic Four. And I thought about going to one of my earliest issues, like I did with Daredevil, but I've been doing some 60s and 70s Marvel lately, so I thought I would take us back to the 90s, because I've been doing primarily 90s stuff. That was the era that I grew up in, 80s and 90s, and so I thought I would start off our Fantastic Four for this year. I'm sure I'll go to some real early stuff later on in the year. I have some FF going all the way back to issue 20, and I have a pretty large Fantastic Four collection, most of which I've never read, the story of my life. But this is Fantastic Four number 345, which is from 1990, and I picked this kind of at random. I really gravitate toward, for whatever reason, covers about characters that are either ostensibly dying or who have decided to give up being superheroes. And I know I've really front-loaded with a lot of that kind of stuff, and I think it's just because I'm always curious to see if the interior is as exciting as what the cover looks like. You know, a lot of these things make a big deal out of maybe there's going to be a status quo change, and they end up being really gimmicky and kind of teasing the audience. And so I wanted to see if this was one of those kinds of things. And it is not false advertising, I would say, but the no more part is in a somewhat different context than you might expect. So it's not like Spider-Man No More. There's not going to be a ethical conundrum about whether or not the Fantastic Four should continue being superheroes, but rather it's a situation where they have lost their powers and they are stuck possibly in time, and they don't know where they are or how to get their powers back. And so maybe they won't be able to be the Fantastic Four anymore. Spoiler alert, eventually they'll get their powers back and they'll still be the Fantastic Four. And as with a lot of great Fantastic Four stories, there's pros and cons to losing their powers, and for some of them this is massively detrimental, and for others of them it might be a mercy or a welcome change. This is written and drawn by Walt Simonson, who didn't put his name in sight anywhere, so I had to look that up. I couldn't tell right away, and once I read that I was like, oh yeah, I can see Simonson in this, but he's doing a different kind of style to some degree. Like, some of his hallmarks are here, but he's going with stylized in a different way from his Thor that really fits this kind of classic pulp science fiction material. This reminds me a lot of like 40s and 50s pulp sci-fi and horror magazines. You've got characters doing a lot of grimacing and closing their eyes a lot. The line work reminds me of things from that period. Maybe even a little bit in the way of EC Comics, but especially just, you know, kind of broad sci-fi stuff. And I think there were a lot of comics about dinosaurs back then, and this goes to the dinosaur place, as you see there on the cover. I wasn't even thinking about dinosaurs when I cracked this open, because I was just curious about the, you know, ripped up costumes and what exactly Fantastic Four No More meant. And in my defense, I'm used to seeing a lot of monsters on Fantastic Four covers, and I didn't even put two and two together. Oh yeah, that's a Triceratops. So I actually was blindsided a little bit by the dinosaurs in the issue, because I wasn't thinking about that, so I wasn't really expecting it. But this is kind of a Planet of the Apes sort of setup. The Fantastic Four have been traveling, but not in the normal way. They've been going through time on the cover, which is, you know, not what Planet of the Apes is doing, or at least the astronauts don't mean to go through time. That just ends up happening. But it is a sort of similar setup in, oh no, we've dropped out of some kind of warp or something, and we could be anywhere. We're kind of lost, and instead of winding up slaves to a bunch of intelligent apes, we wind up in a lot more of a Land of the Lost kind of scenario. And the first page is kind of amusing because there's a lot of fun banter, particularly between Reed and Ben Grimm in this. Simonson has a wonderful voice for all of these characters, and there's this amusing bit at the beginning where, well, and I guess actually is this just in narration? I'm talking about banter, but I thought one of the characters said this is actually just in narration box. But anyway, on the first page here, the narration says the Fantastic Four haven't been racking up frequent flyer miles because they're going through time. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but they also have the Fantasticar, and so even if they were flying, they wouldn't be racking up frequent flyer miles because they're not going to be, in a passenger jet. Anyway, so this is a period that I'm not real familiar with Fantastic Four. Ben Grimm is dating a woman named Sherry, who, and I'm just used to him always being with Alicia, so I'm not familiar with this character. She has been turned into a thing-like creature herself, and Ben Grimm no longer is the thing. So my assumption is that she got his powers somehow. They were transferred to her, maybe, but I don't actually know that. And she is the character who most, of course, is maybe going to be happy losing her powers, but she's also really concerned that it's not going to last, and that Ben is going to get too used to having his girlfriend back as a regular girl and is not going to want her anymore when she turns back into a thing-like creature. And I could see a person complaining that reads a little bit superficial, but it's just the way she describes it. But it is an understandable fear as well. Like, on the one hand, you wouldn't want to throw your boyfriend on the bus if you thought he really cared about you, and what does it say about your trust in him that you might think that? But on the other hand, I think that is a perfectly understandable, if not irrational, fear that any of us would have in that situation. And she comes off pretty sympathetic, a little bit stereotypical for the period, the way men treat women in this. Of course, that's maybe to be expected, but other than that, I think it's pretty relatable and is pretty endearing. And so the Fantastic Four come up against some soldiers who don't know where they are either. They have also kind of crash landed here on this island, this mysterious lost-like island, and they're all confused, and they don't believe the Fantastic Four when they tell them that that's who they are, because they don't have powers, and they just kind of came out of nowhere, and so they're real skeptical of them. And then, oh man, it's a Spinosaurus, suddenly a dinosaur. And I think it's kind of weird how quickly the Fantastic Four resort to just firing at the dinosaurs. It's really weird seeing Reed Richards with a big gun shooting at a Spinosaurus. And of course, it's, I don't want to make too big of a deal out of animal cruelty here, because of course they've got to protect themselves, and this is a bizarre situation and they're just trying to survive. But I might have expected a little bit of talk for a second about, hey, this is a living creature that's just doing what it does. It's just trying to survive itself. Do we really need to shoot at it? Yeah, maybe we do. It would have been nice to have that conversation, I guess. But anyway, I just think it's really funny how Reed is always closing his eyes like that. It's a real golden age looking comic, and I like that a lot about it. At first, I resisted the kind of blocky, jagged faces, and then it really won me over on it as it went along. And this is before I realized it was Simonson. I read this whole issue and did not know who I was reading, and then once I saw his name, it all kind of fell into place. But I had already been won over on the character models with this, because there's so much fun action and kind of crazy circumstances that it ends up really feeling like the correct style for this issue. And so there's a lot of just fighting dinosaurs and hiking, trying to get their bearings and figure out how they're going to deal with this problem. And then there's a little bit of downtime where, again, Ben and Sherry are talking about her situation and whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I really like the way Simonson draws their impassioned kiss here at the bottom of this page. Again, it's endearing stuff. And then, somewhat amusingly, Reed Richards ends up losing his clothes in a stampede after they've been camping, and needs help a little bit later from the soldiers to get his clothes back. This is a real simple issue. It's just figure out how to live on this island temporarily while we're fighting off these dinosaurs, and then try to get back to the Fantastic Four's time machine so that they can salvage parts from it and try to figure out a way to get off this island. And this is my favorite panel in the whole issue, where Ben Grimm, who is suddenly the Thing for a minute with no explanation, and maybe if you've been reading this for a while, you'll understand why this is happening right away, but since I read this totally out of context, and by the way, I think this reads really well out of context, despite the fact that it is the first of at least a two-parter, so it does end on a cliffhanger, but it didn't read like there was any necessary prerequisite. It's not fully getting you up to speed. There's no recap at all, which I appreciate, in telling us, how long Sherry's been with them and all of that. But that's fine. I mean, I can glean enough from the context to know at least she has his powers, or at least she is a rock creature like he was, and they're dating, and she has real mixed feelings about being a rock creature. That's all you need to know for this story, certainly. But you just get this great moment out of nowhere, because we haven't even seen him looking like the Thing before this. The first moment we see that, he's wrangling a raptor, and it's fantastic. And I'm partly excited about this because I love raptors, but just look at the kind of cartoony face, the surprised expression on that raptor. It's great. Now, once we get the explanation for what Ben Grimm is actually doing, I don't know that I buy his strength there. He's just wearing a costume. He's pretending to be the Thing here, and that's for the audience's benefit more than anything, so that for a minute we'll scratch our heads and go, why on earth did he turn into the Thing when nobody on this island has their powers? This is, I don't know if I mentioned this is, by the way, called officially Dinosaur Island, and I think DC also has a Dinosaur Island. This doesn't come up very often. I think it's only in 2 or 3 issues total. So like these two, and maybe it comes back one more time somewhere. I'm not sure, but I looked this up, and it is not a major Marvel thing. So like this is the first appearance of Dinosaur Island. Yay. Not exactly a key issue or anything. It's not going to matter again, I don't think. But like, you have a dinosaur at the top of this page that bites into Ben Grimm's shoulder, and like it hurts a little bit, I guess, but he's fine because he's wearing this huge crazy suit. What's it made of? Like, is it foam? Like, what is it? So for like 3 pages, we're wondering how he's the Thing. Nobody's asking any questions, and then finally one of the soldiers walks up to him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm Ben Grimm. I'm just dressed up like the Thing right now." I love how easy it is for Fantastic Four to get away with these moments. I don't know how it does it. It can just be this wacky. And within the context of this, it does not seem as silly. I mean, I'm laughing at that, but somehow it doesn't seem as silly as it would in a lot of other things. Simonson does a really good job here developing, or maintaining, I should say, internal logic with this material. And then the Fantastic Four and the soldiers. By the way, let me say real quick that I'm also surprised by how much I enjoyed this, because it has 2 things that I typically get bored with very quickly, that I don't care for, just my own personal taste and aesthetics. I don't like military stuff usually. I don't like characters in fatigues, and I don't like stories that take place in the woods. But I do enjoy a good, modern characters up against dinosaurs story. This is 3 years before Jurassic Park. Kind of crazy to read something that close to that and consider that anybody reading this right now is not comparing it to Jurassic Park, doesn't even know what that is yet, probably, unless they read Crichton and they've read that book. But that movie, nobody would have heard of yet, and but it's such a classic and well-written and just fun kind of story that I was not resisting the stuff that I typically don't like about these kinds of stories, and then they are going to look for the time machine, and they come upon the edge of the island and realize that part of the island is missing, including some of the soldiers and their time machine, their kind of time plane. And so Reed Richards says, we might be stuck here, and don't worry about getting your Christmas cards out early. It's a really great cliffhanger. So yeah, this is a ton of fun. I don't have a great deal more to say about it, but like I've said with so many things already on Not Spawn Year, it's another thing that makes me feel remiss in not reading enough of this material. It's sitting right over here. I've got it, and I don't think of myself as a real massive Fantastic Four fan, but a lot of the things I like in Marvel start in Fantastic Four, which is part of the reason I collect it, and I've wound up with a bunch of it from collections, so now I'm just gap filling because I already have it, so it's a collection I'm building even though I don't know the book very well. I probably have 300 or more issues of Fantastic Four, and it's high time that I took a look at more of them. So anyway, that's going to do it for me today. Tomorrow, I'm going to take a look at another single issue from my personal collection, as I always do, and we're going to keep it to Marvel again tomorrow, so look forward to that, and in the meantime, I was Captain Logan. Happy reading. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody.